Hi, my name is Jonathan King, and this is JonathanKing1. I was born on December the 6th, 1944 in London, England, and as a result I'm now a 61-year-old, and I've got a feeling that perhaps I represent the generation that's made the world what it is today, which in some ways is good and in some ways is bad. I love watching the blogs on YouTube of Geriatric 1927, who I think is wonderful, but he's the generation before me. I was lucky enough to spend my life so far in the company of a lot of people who actually shaped the world, mainly in the world of music, but also in the wide world. I've had some incredible ups and some rather unfortunate downs, but if you're interested in hearing my side of the story and what's gone on in my life, stay tuned, and over the next many episodes I'll try and fill you in on what's really happened as opposed to what other people may say. I was born in London, as I said, at the end of the Second World War. My father was American, who'd moved to London, I think when he was 14, to go to school, and my mother was a beautiful young actress, very successful, who had acted with Sir Michael Redgrave, amongst others, but she gave it all up when she met my father and fell in love. He was fighting for the British very early on in the war, was captured by the Germans, was put in a prisoner of war camp in France and escaped. My mum drove an ambulance in the blackout in London during the war. When my father escaped, then she went over to America, and as I said, at the end of the Second World War, in December 1944, I was born. I had a very happy childhood. Early on, my family moved down to Surrey, south of London. I've got two brothers, James, who's a couple of years younger than me and now lives in San Francisco, and my brother Andy, who's about 7 or 8 years younger than me. And the only great tragedy that was to befall us was my father, who died when he was 42, and I was only 8 or 9 at the time. He had a heart attack. His father also, my grandfather, had died of a heart attack aged 42 as well. Both of them had arteriosclerosis, which is when the arteries fur up. So when I got to be 42, I went and had myself checked out to make sure I was still healthy. And I was fine, and I went back for a couple more years, and they said, look, there's no point in you coming here all the time, JK. You're fine, you're fit. And I said, yes, but both my father and grandfather died at 42. I don't want that to happen to me, please. And they said, look, you needn't worry. Did they drink and smoke? And I said, yes, I gather they both did. Do you drink and smoke? I said, oh no, disgusting habits, couldn't even think of it. So they said, well, that's why you're healthy. And I'm glad to say I've survived for certainly another almost 20 years longer, and hope to go on for a long time after that. Although I had a very happy childhood at home in Surrey, in those days after the war, it was very much boys were sent off to boarding school. And no matter how young you were, at about 6 or 7, you went off to boarding school, which I thought, and still think, was an iniquitous and terrible thing to do, and I absolutely hated being torn away from my loving mum and dad at that young age. But I was sent off, and I went first of all to a pre-prep school, Bramshot Chase, and I wrote some terrible letters to my mum saying, I am miserable, please come and take me away. And then down to the south coast, to Seaford, where I went to prep school at Stoke House. I loathed Stoke House. The headmaster was a man called Arthur Spring-Rice Piper, who had thick bottle-bottom glasses with black rims and slicked black hair, and was, I think, a real sadist. He used to beat the boys regularly, me all the time, and took great pleasure doing so. I loathed him, I loathed the school. I remember the town of Seaford was usually miserable because it was rainy and dark and cold, and we were taken out for walks in a crocodile, these young boys in their shorts in the freezing cold, and walking down the promenade with the headmaster behind us telling us what to do. And I remember one particular situation where one of the new younger boys was terribly upset and nervous and probably quite unwell, and had what I can only describe as an accident. And an accident that was clear for us all to see because, as I said, we were wearing shorts and therefore our legs were exposed. Well, of course, the boy was mortified. The headmaster was awful and snapped at him and said, "You walk behind us, you're not one of our crocodile, you just follow us and I will give you a beating when you get back to school. And none of the rest of you are to talk to that boy." Well, I thought this was outrageous. I mean, I was at the time probably 11 or 12 and the boy was 9 or something. And he fell back and I felt terribly sorry for him, although I didn't really know him. And so I fell back too and walked alongside him and said, "Don't you worry, it'll all be fine." And the headmaster said, "King, you'll be beaten too." And I just went on walking with him. And we got back to the school and he was sent upstairs to matron to be reclothed. And I was, as I expected, given a beating. And I didn't regret it at all. And to this day I think I did the right thing. Anyway, that's my early school days. Many more stories of the early school days. I then went to Charterhouse, where subsequently I discovered and named a band, Genesis. But all those stories are to come in future editions. So if you're enjoying this and you'd like to hear more of the truth as opposed to the lies, do please let me know. This is JonathanKing1 signing off.